In this tutorial, I'm going to show you the main workflow of ThruTracker from starting a new project to generating your first counts. When you open up ThruTracker, it's going to ask you to either open up a project you've already been working on or start a new one. I'm going to start a new project here called Gray Bat Example 1. You can choose your location where you want the project to be stored. You can also add some notes about what the project is about. And hit OK, and it's going to ask me whether I want to copy the video files into the project folder or keep them where they are currently. So I'm going to do the reference in place. So this is going to keep the videos in their original location. And I have the video that I'm going to work with already on my computer in the videos folder in ThruTracker examples. And we'll be making some example videos available for you in order to be able to test these different settings out. So we've now added our video to the project. In this case, I'm just adding one video, but you can add sets of videos if you would like. Now we're going to work our way down on the right here. So we've selected our video. We're going to use the default configuration file. We're going to be editing that with the settings that we're choosing here. If you already had a configuration file from another project, you could import that here, but that's more of an advanced feature. Next, we're going to start adjusting some settings to be able to track the bats appropriately. First one being the target diameter. So the first thing I like to do looking at the video is start playing it and seeing where the bats are flying, what a typical bat would look like in your scene. Or if you're not sure, you can guesstimate if there are few bats in your video. In this case, that's not a problem. So I'm just going to pause this. You can also use the arrow keys to go forward and back. And in this case, I'm going to pick a bat at a fairly typical distance and size from the camera, maybe this one over here. And I'm going to choose my target diameter and then click on my bat. And then we can just zoom in so that you can actually see the pixels of what we're talking about. All right. Now that's about 15 pixels. We could actually count them. I might make it a little bit bigger. And in this case, we're just going to be tracking the white bodies of the bat because you can reliably see the bat's bodies, whatever configuration or angle that the bats are flying. So I might bump that up just a little bit so we can get that full size in there. And again, this is an approximation, doesn't need to be perfect. And then we can zoom back out by hitting the fit button. And you can see these bats down here are a little bit smaller. It's not going to filter bats that are smaller than that. That's in an advanced setting. And if the bats are a little bit larger, that's okay. If the bat was 2, 3, 4 times larger, that's where we would want to do multiple sizes. And we would set a maximum diameter. In this case, let's say the white part of the bat was as large as that blue circle, then we'd want to enable multiple sizes. But in this case, the bats are relatively similar in size, so I'm just going to use one diameter. In this case, that 17 looks fine. And what's that doing? It is looking for targets approximately that size, and it is merging targets that are closer together than that size. So if we used a really large target diameter, well, what would happen is when you get two bats that are closer together, if they fit together in that circle, it's going to merge that down to one detection. So we don't want to do that. We want to get it to about the size of the bats. Let's drop it back down to about 20. All right, next is the sensitivity. This is just asking how much contrast do you get for the targets that you're trying to track compared to the background. You can see in this case, the bats are quite distinct. It's not difficult to see them. And so we have 7 different options here. Moderate is probably fine. In this case, I might even drop it to low because you can see the targets so well. But I think in either case, it's going to be fine. Now, I usually leave suppress background on. What that's doing is getting rid of these faint detections. The only time I turn that off is if there is a very faint detection that I'm trying to track, then that can help boost our detection rate. But most of the time, that helps with filtering false positives. Next, we have target polarity. So this is asking, is what we're trying to detect lighter than the background, darker than the background, or a combination of both? In this case, I only want to detect the white bodies of the bats, even though we could track the wings. The wings are bigger, and they're just going to overlap with each other more because the bodies are so distinctive and we're not missing the bodies, as far as I can tell, very often. I'm just going to keep that as a light target on a dark background. If we did want to track both the wings and the bodies, we could. We could put this as lighter and darker. In that case, I would draw my circle for the target diameter so that it included both the body and the wing. But in this case, I'm just going to do the body. And for polarity, I'm going to do lighter target on a darker background. Next, we're going to do maximum density. So this is asking how many bats are we expecting to see at the peak density. So in this case, I'm going to choose 6 to 20 because I'm not seeing more than 20. But here we can see over 6. So I'm going to go for that medium value. Next is the bounding box. So if we're trying to generate a count, the typical way of doing that is by generating a bounding box or a gate. What this is going to do is count the number of times tracks start inside and go outside of our gate, or vice versa. So in this case, the bats are all pretty much going from the bottom of the screen to the top. So I'm going to drag the sides of my gate all the way to the edges. You can see my values for the bottom is 100%, left is 0, and right is 100. So we don't have to worry about boundary crossings on those sides. All we're really looking at is crossings top to bottom in our screen. And so I'm going to drag this one. You can also adjust it, fine tuning using the arrows over here. Or if you want, you can draw a polygon. So what we could do is draw something like this and draw whatever shape that we want. But I'm going to go back to the rectangle in this case because I think that that will be fine. And now we're finished. So I can just close that and go to our exclusion zone or a mask. So this is a region that you can paint by selecting and just drawing over the image parts of the screen where you don't want to track detections. So in this case, it's not really a problem for this video, but let's say we had a lot of bats circling around in a certain place in the background, or there could be numbers that we want to exclude. We can just paint over that, and then it will not track any detections in the region that we have painted. So I'm not going to do that for this one, so I'm going to clear the mask and close that out. So now I have my settings selected and I want to test them. So I'm going to go down to this green button and do test current settings. And what this is doing is tracking starting at whatever frame you had selected in the video and going, in this case, for 75 frames. So down here, you can adjust that. And it's going to process that little window and then just loop over for you. So you can pause it. You can go frame by frame if you want to see how it's working. And what's cool is you can also go in here and adjust different settings. So if I wanted to see what happens if I boost my sensitivity to high, well, I'm picking up some false positives here. So I can see immediately the change, and now I can go back, reset it back to low, and make sure I'm dialed in exactly where I want to be. Now that I have it dialed where I want it, we can go into our next step, which is the processing. I will just note there are some advanced settings here. Most of the times you don't need to do this. I'll make another video that has examples of when you might want to use some of these advanced settings. But for now, I just want you to know that they exist. So when we're done, we're going to click Save and Advance, and we're going to proceed to the next tab, which is the video processing. So in this tab, we can apply those settings to part or all of an entire video. We can do batch processing of multiple videos, and we can make review videos after we have already processed them. So in this case, I'm just going to process the first 30 seconds of that video that we were just looking at. So starting with the beginning at frame 0 and going to frame 900. So This video is 30 frames per second. That's pretty typical. And so 900 frames would be the first 30 seconds. If I had multiple videos, I could choose which one I want to process here if I just want to do one of them. But in this case, we just have the one video, so I'm going to stick with that. So I'm going to say process single video, and it's going to give me some options for the output that we're going to make. And we can do an overlay or not. Usually I keep that on. You can have a number of dots trailing your detections and the size of those dots. You can choose whether to show your gate overlay or not. And then you can decide whether you want to have the entire video with the review, or you can do a tracks only video. That's going to show a compilation of clips of all of the time where you had detections. So say you got 20 tracks over a 1 hour of video. Instead of making that whole hour of video, you can just make a video of those little clips where there were actual detections. Or you can do a snapshot review. And what this does is, for example, take 5 seconds of your video for every minute and then compile that into a review video. So sometimes this is helpful if you just want to see the tracking at different times, but you don't want to make an entire hour and a half long review video. You can do a snapshot review. I'm going to do the whole video in this case because it's only 30 seconds. And then you can choose if you want to change the color map for the video. In this case, I'm going to keep it at its original white hot or grayscale because I think it's a little bit easier to see some of the colors, but it can be fun to try some of these other color palettes. Makes it a little bit more visually appealing. But for review, I'm just going to do this original, and then with the gate count on, it's already going to give the number of crossings at the bottom, so we don't need to show the cumulative track count. All right, now we have our settings, so I'm going to hit start, run, and this is going to go through and do the processing. There are 3 steps here. If you want to see in more detail, you can open the console and it will show you what it's doing. Really depends the speed of processing on a lot of factors, but especially for thermal video, we should at least be at real time. You can see that was quite a bit faster than 30 seconds. All right, now we're done and we can see our results. And what we see is a plot of the activity over the video. And this orange plot here is showing the activity rate. It's fairly constant. And then in blue, it's showing the cumulative number of tracks. So if we go to the end here, what's cool is you can click on this graph and it will take you in the video, different places. So we got 239 tracks or exits counted in that 30-second window. And then we can go to different parts. So I like to see what's happening at peak emergence. And we can now step through here. I'm going to close my activity plot now so we can see in a little bit more detail. And whenever a bat crosses the bounding box, it's going to draw a circle that's the same color as the track. And that's how you know you got a count. You can also look at the counts here, the number of bats entering the box, the number of bats exiting, and the net, which is the number of exits minus the entries. And so we can see here, here's the green bat going, and there's its exit count. And then here's a bluish purple bat. There's its circle. There's going to be a yellow and the green, another yellow, purple. And you can see those little circles hang on for a few frames afterwards so you can make sure that that count started. Here is a lavender bat and then green. And so we can see that those counts are being accurate. Now, if it was not tracking correctly, we could always go back to our detection settings, make adjustments as needed, and then reprocess. You can also go back here and process an entire video or apply this to a whole batch of videos. If we want to just re-export the videos that we already made, we can use this Make Review Video from Last Run button. And now let's say I want to make it without trails, then I could turn that off, or we could change this to a tracks only video and make whatever kind of export that we want. We could also change the color, and so we could do it like that. I'm not going to do that right now, so I'm just going to hit cancel. And then since we've already processed this, we can go to our tracking review. If you've made multiple output videos, you could select which one you want to look at over here. I'm going to save a tutorial on what you can do with manual classification tracks and a vetting tool that we've recently added to ThruTracker for a future video. The last thing I just want to show you is that all of this data is saved and at your disposal. So you can open this up in ThruTracker and access that project later on, but it's also saved on your computer, so you can use it however you want. In order to access that, you go to File, Show in Explorer, or Show in Finder if you're on Mac, and that is going to open up the project folder that has everything in it that's being used by ThruTracker. Now, I'm not going to walk through everything here. You can explore it, and I'll make a more detailed video at a later date. But normally what I'm looking at is in the Outputs folder. So if we want to see that video that was made, we can go to the Overlay Videos, and then you can just open up this video in whatever program that you want. You can edit it, you can export it, you can share it on social media. I like to use this program VirtualDub 2 because it lets you go frame by frame through the videos, and that can be a nice way to do a similar thing that we're doing in ThruTracker without having to open up ThruTracker. So the videos are there. You also have some other outputs. So that graph that I showed you, there is a different version of that that is saved every time you do a run. And this is in the figures folder in your project in outputs. And you can see all of that data. It saves the maximum number of bats that had exited minus the number that had entered at a given point. And so that is our official count for this tracking. There's also all of the detection data, the track level data, everything you would want is available for you in here in CSV files, videos, etc. All right, so now we're finished with that. We can just close ThruTracker and all that data is saved for you, and you can use that however you wish. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one.